everyone, to the third and final episode of the Mania Prediction Show. I thank you guys so much for their support. Over 550 views on the first episode and over 70 views on the second one. And here we are going to discuss the final 10 bowl games, including the national championship. Now, I'm Grandmaster Shaman, and if you guys have missed any of the previous episodes, make sure you go back and check those out, as well as checking out the NFL prediction shows that come out every single week, and this being the final week of the NFL football regular season, I think it's equally as important to go check out those predictions. Now, we're going to start things off with the Tax Slayer Bowl in Jacksonville, Florida, between the 8-4 Louisville Cardinals versus the 23rd ranked Mississippi State Bulldogs. Both teams 8-4. Louisville, a 6.5 point favorite. So, looking at both of these teams, of course, the ACC a pretty tough conference, and the SEC a pretty tough conference. I mean, a very top-heavy conference the SEC is, especially nowadays. But we got Lamar Jackson on Louisville as probably the key player to look out for, especially on Louisville's side of the football. Last year's Heisman Trophy winner, equally as impressive this year. Outstanding season he had for the Cardinals. And then, of course, for Mississippi State, probably their running back, Aris Williams. Now, normally I'd say Nick Fitzgerald should be definitely the go-to guy, but out with an injury is going to be really hard for Mississippi State to really function without that guy, and they're really going to need Aris Williams to stand up and make a statement in this football game. Right now, Louisville's offense comparatively is just, they're so good. They're such a good team. They absolutely annihilated Kentucky. They have a really solid football team. The biggest problem is going to be on the defensive side of the football, especially for Louisville. You know, even without Nick Fitzgerald, Louisville's lackluster defense is going to come into play huge in this game. But I just think that Mississippi State doesn't have the talent without Nick Fitzgerald to take full advantage of that weak defensive line and weak secondary of the Louisville Cardinals, and ultimately that's going to come into play as well. So I think that Louisville, you know, Lamar Jackson is going to be able to score. It's just going to happen, and I think that Louisville is going to end up winning this game. It's probably going to be close at first, and then a late touchdown to put Louisville up by 10 as the final buzzer sounds. So I'm picking the Louisville Cardinals by 10. Moving on, next up, the AutoZone Liberty Bowl in Memphis, Tennessee. The Iowa State Cyclones sitting at 7-5, taking on 20th ranked Memphis, who is 10-2 and one of the most potent offenses in the league, with a 4-point favorite in this game over the Cyclones. Now, Iowa State won in Oklahoma this year, beating a playoff contending team. That's kind of crazy to think about, especially with a guy that his first career start was ultimately in this game. But for Iowa State, I think the biggest key player to look out for is going to be Joel Lanning. Now, I've watched a lot of Iowa State football games this year. They've been really entertaining to watch, and a lot of crazy stuff going down for Iowa State. And I think Joel Lanning is the heart and soul of this team. I don't really need to even say any of his great statistics defensively, because this guy is legitimately the team's heart. You know, if this guy goes down to injury, their heart gets ripped out, and they really play worse. They ultimately play worse without this guy on the field. So I think this guy is going to be a huge, huge factor in this game. And I think Joel Lanning could ultimately be one of the deciding factors if Iowa State has a shot at winning this game. Of course, then there's Memphis' side of the football, because Memphis' Riley Ferguson, the quarterback for their team, with almost 4,000 yards, sitting at 39.71, and 36 touchdowns, 9 picks. He's had a terrific season in the AAC, one of the better players in the league, barely losing to Central Florida in the championship game in a high-scoring affair. And I think this is going to be a very interesting matchup. Iowa State has experience. They have experience in the shootout conference. You know, they play Texas Tech, they play Oklahoma, they play Oklahoma State, they play these really tough, badass teams, really, that go out there and they throw the football around, which is exactly what Memphis is going to do. The biggest question is going to be whether or not they can stop them from scoring as much as they do, and whether or not their offense can reply. And I just think that Memphis, with one of the top offenses in the league and one of the most consistent quarterbacks, I think that they're just going to be too much. I don't think Iowa State has it in them, especially the way Iowa State finished the season was really quite bad. So I'm going to have to pick Memphis in this game by 10, especially considering that the Liberty Bowl is in Memphis. That is an added factor. I would probably only pick them by about 6, but based on the fact that they're at home, I'm picking them by a little bit more than that. I'm going to pick them by 10. Next up, on December the 30th, still, we have the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl in, University of Phoenix Stadium in Arizona. We got UW, Washington Huskies, sitting at the 11th ranked team in the country and 10-2, and the 9th ranked Penn State Nittany Lions at 10-2 with a 2-point favorite on their side. So, some key players to watch out for: defensive end Vita Vea for Washington, a potential first-round draft pick, potential All-American. He has had a terrific season for UW all season long. If Washington really wants to be able to win this game, they're going to need their defensive line to step up, and Vita Vea is basically the heart of that defensive line. That's going to be huge. Now, one of the things that most people would say in this situation is Penn State's running back Saquon Barkley is the other key player. However, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that because my biggest issue with Saquon Barkley is that Penn State is number 102 in the league in rushing attempts. They don't run the ball very much. They really don't. Saquon Barkley does occasionally get the ball, and we've seen in big-time situations, they don't rely on Saquon Barkley. This is one of the reasons why I did not have him winning the Heisman. I didn't have him even coming close because they don't rely on this guy. This guy isn't the best player on the team, let alone in the entire league. He's not the best college player in the league at all. He's a very solid running back. He has over 1,000 yards rushing. But if you look at some of the big games that he has had to play, he has not been a factor. He hasn't really done anything. They've relied a lot on quarterback Tracy McSorley, who has 3,228 yards passing, 26 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. They're 24th in the league in passing offense. That is their strong suit. Again, 102nd in rushing attempts. In general, they don't run the ball very much. When they need something big to happen, they throw the football. And that is going to come in big. While we look at University of Washington, they have the number 3 ranked rush defense. So even if they try to run the football, I don't think Saquon Barkley, especially against this powerful defensive line, is going to be able to do very much. And while University of Washington is the 22nd ranked pass defense in the league, which is still very impressive, it is a lot weaker than their defensive line and linebacking core that are number 3 in rush defense. And on top of that, they have the 6th ranked scoring defense in the league, which makes this a really low scoring game. And I think that favors Washington. I really do. And because of that, I'm going to have to pick the Washington Huskies to win this game. They're going to stifle McSorley and Saquon Barkley and get past Penn State. I think it's going to be a really close, lower-scoring game, but I think Washington wins this game by 6. Big upset for me, but I think that's what's going to happen, to be honest with you. And then the final game on December the 30th, we have the Capital One Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida. The home team being the Hurricanes, taking on a 6th-ranked Wisconsin, sitting at a 12-1 record, but they did get stifled by Ohio State in that bowl game. It was not very pretty. Of course, Miami 10th in the league, and 10-2, a pretty rough end of the season, getting annihilated by Clemson, and that really, really puts them in a bad spot against Wisconsin, being 6-point underdogs at home in their bowl game. That is pretty bad. But Wisconsin, probably their key player, Jonathan Taylor, he's third in the league in rushing at 1,847 yards and 13 touchdowns. But Miami's defense, obviously one of the best rushing defenses in the league and one of the best turnover defenses in the league. My key player isn't actually a player for the Miami Hurricanes. It's this thing called the turnover chain. I know it's crazy. I know it sounds like I'm just joking around, but the fact is, this turnover chain has implemented such a massive change in the culture of the Miami Hurricanes, especially compared to previous seasons in the last just half decade. It has been a completely different football team that we've seen this season, and a large part of it has to do with the turnover chain itself. Because of that, Miami is third in the league in takeaways at almost 3 per game. Almost 3 takeaways per game. Compared to roughly 1 turnover on offense per game, that is going to be a huge factor in this game. And Wisconsin is number 97 in turnovers, which is bad. They average turning the ball over almost twice a game. That's huge. And if Miami can force 2 more turnovers than they give up, I think that's going to be the key in this football game. I think Miami learned from their mistakes in Clemson. Both of these teams are very defensive. Wisconsin likes to run the football. Miami's rush defense is a very solid. My apologies. And I think Miami ends up winning this game by 3. I don't even know if either team will get to 10 points. It could happen, but it's going to be a very defensive football game, and I think Miami wins this one by 3 in another upset that I'm picking here in these BCS bowl games. Moving on now to January 1st, the final day for regular bowl games. We start off with the Outback Bowl, remaining in the state of Florida in Tampa. We got 8-4, the Michigan Wolverines taking on 8-4 South Carolina. Michigan 7.5-point favorites in this football game. One of the key players to watch out for, especially for Michigan, we've got quarterback Brandon Peters, third Michigan quarterback to play this season. They've got a lot of changes on that offensive side of the football. Without him against Ohio State, Michigan really struggled, and it was a really big problem for them, and so getting him back is going to be huge, and I think he's going to be the player to watch out for in this football game, if Michigan, especially if they want to win this football game. South Carolina, once again, quarterback is going to be a huge factor. Jake Bentley has 2,555 yards, 16 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. I know that's not super spectacular numbers, but for South Carolina, he's going to need to step up because Michigan has a pretty decent run defense of their own, and it's going to be really important that they pass the ball on Michigan's weak secondary if they want to win this game. And I think that South Carolina has a lot more stability on offense. I think that this guy, whether or not he's this amazing player, has been a stable source of yardage and power for this team, and I think that that's going to be the ultimate difference. I think the stability and the good play by this quarterback is going to ultimately be the difference, and South Carolina is going to win this game by 6. So we got the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl in Atlanta, Georgia, between the 12th ranked undefeated Central Florida Black Knights taking on the 7th ranked 10-3 Auburn Tigers, and they're 9.5-point favorites over the unbeaten Central Florida football team, and this is going to be a very interesting game. Last year we had the undefeated MAC champions, Western Michigan. They played really well against Wisconsin in a big-time bowl game last year. And I think Central Florida, with the second-ranked offense in terms of points and fifth-ranked offense in terms of yards, could potentially be even better and mirror what they did when Blake Bortles was there, and that win a big-time January bowl game. Because, if you guys remember, They were in this exact situation before, except even bigger in a BCS bowl game. I believe it was the Fiesta Bowl, if I remember correctly. Don't yell at me if I got that wrong. I'm sorry. But they were in a BCS bowl game with Blake Bortles as their quarterback, and they ended up winning that game. And I think that's going to be huge. So Central Florida, their quarterback, Mackenzie Milton, has 3,795 yards, 35 touchdowns, and 9 picks. He has been the heart of this offense, and that is going to be a huge factor. If this guy can continue to play at the level that he has played at, especially against an SEC very defensive football team, they are going to have a lot of things going for them. And another thing that they're going to need to work on is their 92nd ranked defense, because that's going to be huge. But they are 4th in turnovers taken from the opposing team. I'm gonna say sorry for the lighting problems, but the main idea is that you guys listen to what I'm trying to put down here. As the Auburn Tigers, their key player is going to be halfback Kerryon Johnson with 1,320 yards rushing and 17 touchdowns, which I believe is tied for second in the league in rushing touchdowns. He has been a force to be reckoned with on that Auburn offense, and that is going to be a huge factor, especially against this 92nd ranked defense like UCF has. So this is going to be a very offensive football game, at least in my opinion. Auburn does have the 13th ranked defense in the league, 16th ranked pass defense, but they don't really turn the ball over. And if UCF, with their 4th ranked turnover defense, can turn the football over, even if it's in the red zone or something, I think that's going to be key. If they can get more turnovers than they give up, they win this football game, and I'm going to pick Central Florida to do just that, and they win this game by 6. I think that's going to be a huge factor in this game. So next up, we have the last of the regular bowl games. We have the Citrus Bowl in Orlando, Florida, with 14th ranked Notre Dame sitting at 9-3 versus 17th ranked LSU, also sitting at 9-3. Now, both of these running backs are going to be the main key. Notre Dame, of course, have had some quarterback struggles all season. That's going to be something that is going to come up big in this game. They're going to have to rely on running back Josh Adams, though they have done that all year. 1,386 yards. He was probably in the top 5 in the Heisman running, probably sitting just outside those top guys that ended up going to the actual award ceremony. He has the most 60-yard plus rushing touchdowns in the entire league, and he is a big play factor, something Notre Dame really needs if they want to win this football game. Meanwhile, on LSU's side, they have Darius Juice with 1,153 yards rushing and 11 touchdowns. Not nearly as impressive as Josh Adams in terms of numbers, but he has been a huge force to be reckoned with on that LSU football team. And I think that the big playability of Notre Dame's offense is going to be the ultimate key. If they can get 2 touchdowns of over 40 yards against LSU's defense, they have no chance of losing this game, at least in my personal opinion from watching them every single game this season. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm biased because I'm a Notre Dame fan, but I'm just trying to look at this from an outside standpoint. I think that LSU has a really solid football team, and from the footage that I have watched and the games that I have watched LSU play, they're definitely going to be a force, but I just don't know if LSU's defense is going to be able to hold up against the big play ability of the Notre Dame football team, and I think that's going to ultimately be a major factor in this game. If Josh Adams can rip off a couple of 40-yard plays, or even if they throw the football for about 40 or so yards leading to a score, I think that is going to be the big difference in this football game, and Notre Dame, I think, can do that and end up winning this football game by 7. Y'all can comment in the comment section and let me know how stupid I am for picking Notre Dame to win this game, but I honestly think that they could do it. But moving on now to our last 3 games. It's the playoff. It's the playoff, and I have heard a lot about this because this has been the talk of the town ever since the rankings were released. But we're going to start off with the All-State Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, Louisiana, as the Clemson Tigers, number 1 in the country, 3-point underdogs as the number 1 team in the country, taking on 4th-ranked Alabama. So this is going to be huge because I think that Clemson has a pretty solid football team, but let me run down some of these statistics for you. So the key players in this football game are going to be both of the quarterbacks. Quarterback Kelly Bryant for Clemson has 2,678 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. But compare that to Jalen Hurts, the quarterback for Alabama, with 1,940 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, and one interception. For a quarterback that has played as long as Jalen Hurts has, that is crazy. 1 pick. They had 768 yards rushing and 8 touchdowns as well at quarterback, which has been a huge part of the dual threat capability of this guy. And Nick Saban has completely changed his offense to surround a running quarterback, something they haven't really had for quite some time. But if you look at the total stats here, Alabama 10th in points per game, 16th in yards on offense, 9th in rush offense, 84th in pass offense, and 1st in the league in not turning the ball over. But if we compare that to Clemson's defense, who's 4th in points allowed, 5th in yards allowed, 10th in rush defense, 9th in pass defense, and not really a good takeaway team, 73rd in the league in that category, but their defense can match Alabama pretty well. And then if you look at the flip side, you've got Clemson's offense, which has been stifled all year, 25th in points per game, 34th in yards, 27th in rushing, 67th in passing, 28th in giveaways. But compare that to Alabama's defense, 1st in points allowed, 2nd in yards allowed, 2nd in rush, 8th in pass, and 52nd in takeaways. Clemson's offense just can't keep up with that. But Alabama, their offense and Clemson's defense almost match. That's going to be a huge, huge factor in this game. And I think that Clemson's offense isn't going to be able to get enough done. Alabama's defense is just too good. They're just too good for Clemson's lackluster offense, who hasn't really been able to do anything all season, including their loss to Syracuse. Mind you, I know Kelly Bryant did not play, whatever. I don't want to hear any of those excuses. The fact is they lost to Syracuse. Syracuse is not a good football team. Alabama had their backup quarterback come in, and they still won football games. They're a better and more well-rounded team than Clemson is. That's just a fact. And I think even in a low-scoring game, I think Alabama's going to win this game by 10 points. I just don't think Clemson has enough offensively to keep up with Alabama's defense. And if someone gets hurt, they don't have anyone to come in. No matter whether it's their quarterback, their running backs, their wide receivers, their offensive line, if anybody goes down, they don't have anyone to back it up because they don't have enough depth on that team. They have a solid starting lineup, but no depth. Meanwhile, Alabama, they lose Jalen Hurts, and they come in with another quarterback and still dominate. They don't use that excuse with, our starting quarterback got injured, we lost. Oh, that's totally not fair that you. No, I don't want to hear any of those excuses. Clemson lost to Syracuse. Period. That's what happened. Syracuse has a win over the current number 1 ranked team in the league. Clemson will not win this game. I have no doubt in my mind that Clemson will not win this game. They just can't do it. They just don't have the offensive firepower and the weapons on the offensive side of the football to challenge the best defense in the league. They don't. Meanwhile, Clemson has a solid defense, but Bama's offense can challenge all of those, especially with their run game. Jalen Hurts' dual threat ability is going to come in huge in this football game, and I think that's going to be enormous. But moving on now to the Rose Bowl, who will challenge Alabama in the national championship. We got 2nd-ranked Oklahoma sitting at 12-1, taking on 12-1 Georgia, who is 1.5-point favorites over the number 2 team, which is really interesting because the 3 and the 4 seed, the 2 SEC teams, are favored over the 2 non-SEC teams, which I guess makes sense. So we got key players to look out for. Of course, Heisman Trophy winner. It kind of makes me throw up a little bit to say that over such a horrid human being. Okay, maybe that's a little harsh, but this guy is not a good person. 4,340 yards passing, 41 touchdowns, 5 picks. He's a solid freaking quarterback, though. At least right now. I don't know about in the NFL, but he's a solid freaking quarterback right now. And, of course, on the flip side, Nick Chubb and this rushing offense for Georgia is going to be huge key. He has 1,175 yards and 13 touchdowns. Georgia has 3 500-plus yard runners on their team, and that's going to come in huge. Oklahoma, they have one of the best offenses in the league, 4th in points per game, 1st in yards, 26th rush, 3rd in pass, and 12th in giveaways. They don't really give the ball away a lot. Meanwhile, Georgia, though, 3rd in points per game allowed, 4th in yards allowed, 95th in rush yards allowed, but 2nd in pass, which is a perfect matchup for this Oklahoma offense. 2nd in passing defense, that's crazy. Meanwhile, Georgia's offense has been a little bit struggling. They have the 21st in points per game, 33rd in yards, 10th in rush, though, but 107th in passing offense and 14th in giveaways, which is really solid. But Oklahoma, 45th in points allowed, 52nd in yards allowed, 38th in rush defense, 82nd in pass defense, and 87th in takeaways. That's brutal. That's brutal. And I think that if Georgia can hold Oklahoma under 35 points, they win. I'm going to be straight up. Nick Chubb and this rushing offense is just going to kill him. But I think Georgia wins this game by 7. I think Oklahoma's offense is a really solid football team. And I think that, all things considered, they have enough there to get close. But I think Georgia holds them under 35 points, and then they end up winning this game by a touchdown. Georgia plays Alabama in the national championship. And then I just don't think, Georgia's not going to be able to run the ball very well against Alabama. And then with the 107th ranked pass offense, it's just not going to be enough. I think Alabama wins the national championship against Georgia by 10. And that's it. That's going to be the whole season. Next year, we got some crazy stuff going on. I'm going to give you guys a season preview once August rolls around, but that's not going to be for quite some time. So thank you all for watching this series. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to see you next year for Bowl Mania, as well as next year for probably weekly predictions on just a few of the top games in college football. And we'll see you next season.